for you to sort of, show the world that, there's more to beauty than just, what meets the eye.
You can't really prove how you are inside in 5-minute interviews.
Before she was the face of elegance, before the world knew her name, Christy Turlington lit a cigarette and unknowingly lit a fuse. Her rise seemed effortless from quiet Florida stables to the blinding lights of global runways. But behind every photo, every flawless frame, something was unraveling. This is not just the story of a supermodel. It is the story of what it costs to look perfect, and what if the bravest thing you can do is leave before it breaks you. Christy Turlington's story does not start with a runway. It starts with smoke. The curl of a cigarette in her teenage fingers was not rebellion. It was routine. By 13, she was already hooked. Not on fame, but nicotine. Long before she graced the covers of Vogue or became the face of Calvin Klein, she was just a quiet horse girl in Florida, inhaling more doubt than dreams. It's not the kind of beginning people expect from a supermodel, but that's what made Christy different. Her rise was never typical, nor was the struggle simmering beneath it. Born in Walnut Creek, California, to a Salvadoran flight attendant mother and a commercial pilot father, Christy lived in a house where order ruled and ambition stayed grounded. Her beauty wasn't polished, it was raw and effortless. She had that quiet kind of striking look that didn't scream for attention. Still, people stared. Especially when she moved to Miami with her family, where her tall, angular frame and almond eyes made her a silent standout in stables and schoolyards. But Christy was not chasing beauty. She was chasing normalcy, something to quiet the noise in her head. That noise grew louder when the modeling found her. A local photographer spotted her at 13 while she was out riding horses. One photo led to another, and just like that, she was flying to New York for test shoots before she could even drive a car. On the outside, it looked like a fairy tale young girl plucked from obscurity, destined for supermodel stardom. But on the inside, Christy was already struggling. She did not feel glamorous. She felt detached. Smoking, she later admitted, became her armor. "I started at 13 and could not stop for years," she said. "It was the one thing I had control over when everything else felt surreal." School friends did not understand her new life, neither did she. Between homework and headshots, Christy juggled two identities, one grounded in teenage awkwardness and the other pulled into a world obsessed with images. Rejection came early. So did the pressure to be thinner, quieter, cooler. "I did not think I belonged," she confessed years later. She was not bubbly, she was not bold. She was observant, someone who watched more than she spoke. That made her powerful in front of a camera, but isolated behind it. One forgotten memory stands out. A modeling scout once told her she was too quiet to make it in this business. Christy did not respond. She did not need to. Her silence would later become her strength and her shield. Because even then, something inside her knew this world might not be built to last. Not for someone like her. Before the fashion industry named her a legend, Christy Turlington was already walking a tightrope before the world even learned her name. Between visibility and vulnerability, between elegance and escape. And that cigarette in her hand? It was not just a habit. It was the first sign she was burning out long before the cameras flashed. So it begs the question, what happens when a girl is handed the world before she's even figured out who she is and realizes the dream might be breaking her? It all started with a camera flash and a stranger's words, "You should be a model." When a local photographer spotted her, Christy Turlington was just 13, riding horses in Miami. There was nothing glamorous about that moment. It was just a girl in dusty riding boots, her hair tied back, barely aware of her beauty. But that photo shoot led to another, and another. By 16, she was flying to New York during school breaks. At first, she juggled algebra and assignments between runways and red carpets, but the pace quickened. The world wanted her full-time. Christy's breakout moment came in 1987 when she appeared on the cover of British Vogue, a soft, haunting image that whispered rather than screamed. Fashion editors took notice. So did designers. Soon, she was walking for Chanel, Versace, Calvin Klein, and Valentino. Her face became the canvas for fashion's biggest dreams. She wasn't just modeling clothes. She was embodying an entire era. With her poise, intelligence, and almost spiritual calm, Christy did not just wear elegance. She was elegant. Then came the 90s, and with it, the supermodel explosion. Christy, alongside Linda Evangelista, Naomi Campbell, and Cindy Crawford, was no longer just a face in a magazine. She was a global phenomenon. They were dubbed the Trinity, and later part of the iconic Big Five. They did not just walk the runway, they owned it. Christy appeared in over 500 magazine covers. She had contracts with Calvin Klein, Maybelline, and countless couture houses. She closed runway shows with grace, not flash. Karl Lagerfeld called her the most beautiful woman in the world. Versace made her a mainstay. She was everywhere. Times Square billboards, glossy spreads, and music videos, like George Michael's Freedom 90. But behind the perfect images was a grind few could imagine. Call times at 4 a.m. cross-continental flights with no sleep. Hundreds of people touched, tweaked, and adjusted her face, her hair, and her clothes, all while being told to smile like it was effortless. And then there were the expectations. To stay thin, to stay young, to stay perfect. Christy never spoke much about eating disorders, but the pressure was visible. Her image must be flawless because brands had billions riding on her beauty. She once admitted, "I'd go days without really eating." You're surrounded by this constant message that smaller is better. There was no room for imperfection, no space for self-doubt. But it crept in anyway. Even as the world praised her, the mirror didn't always agree. "I didn't see what they saw," she said later. "I just saw someone trying to keep up."
The supermodel Christy Turlington caught our eye on magazine covers and runways. Well, she is here this morning in a very different role, catching our ears as spokesperson for Lung Cancer Awareness Week.
And then there was the smoke. The addiction that began in her early teens followed her deep into her modeling prime. It wasn't edgy or cool anymore. It was a dependency. She'd light a cigarette between shows, after interviews, during fittings. It became part of the performance. But the reality was darker. Smoking wasn't chic. It was a coping mechanism, a way to numb the exhaustion and anxiety that success brought with it. In a quiet but chilling twist, everything shifted when Christy volunteered for a routine lung scan at New York Weill Cornell Medical Center. She wasn't expecting anything serious. But at just 31 years old, she was diagnosed with early-stage emphysema, a chronic and irreversible lung condition. It stopped her cold. Christy had already lost her father to lung cancer. Now she was carrying the same damage inside her. She began pulling back, canceling shoots, saying no to contracts. While other models chased more fame, Christy was retreating. She started showing up less and less, and eventually people stopped asking. The girl who was everywhere suddenly wasn't. The fashion world didn't get an explanation. It was just silence. But Christy didn't just leave the runway. She ran towards something else.
Now, Christy's going back to make her mind perfect as well, getting her degree from NYU now in her junior year.
Senior year. I have to correct you. That
Sorry,
year
excuse
is
me.
vital.
You did, yeah. And what subject are you studying?
I'm studying comparative religion and art history.
She enrolled at New York University, quietly and without fanfare, and began studying comparative religion and Eastern philosophy. Later, she would add art history to her studies. It wasn't a press move. It was not about rebranding. It was about curiosity and a desire to understand the world beyond photo shoots and front rows. In lecture halls filled with students who had never worn couture, she found something she had not felt in years: freedom. In an interview, she said, "I wanted to be seen for something other than my face." New York University didn't care about her modeling past. Professors didn't bow. Her brain, not her bone structure, was finally the focus. She studied the Bhagavad Gita, Buddhist texts, and sacred art, diving deep into spirituality. She meditated, wrote essays, and let go of the need to be perfect. What she discovered was a kind of peace she had never found backstage. In a world obsessed with image, she was now chasing the truth. Rumors flew. Had she been fired? Was she sick? Was she over it? The truth was simpler and sadder. She was burnt out. "I didn't disappear to make a statement," she said once. I disappeared because I couldn't keep going. And in that quiet exit, there was something louder than any headline. It was a refusal, a boundary. The industry had taken her beauty, her time, and almost her health. But it would not take her peace. Not anymore. Christie's absence only made her more iconic in the years that followed. Fashion editors still speak about her walk as graceful, almost meditative. Photographers remember her stillness, how she didn't try to pose, she just was. She didn't need to command the room. The room leaned in. But for all the praise, there was a price. Being a supermodel meant being owned by brands, by cameras, by public fantasy. And once she stepped out of the spotlight, it became clear. Christy Turlington was not just another pretty face. She was someone who had seen too much, too soon, and made the rare choice to walk away before it broke her. So now, when people look back on her career, they remember the image. Poised, perfect, untouchable. But maybe the more honest question is, what does it say about an industry when the only way to survive is to leave it? Christy Turlington had walked every major runway in the world. She'd smiled through pain, held impossible poses, and kept up appearances when the cameras never stopped flashing. But when she finally stepped back, it wasn't because the lights dimmed. It was because something deeper pulled her away, something the fashion world could never understand. Her life beyond the catwalk was full of surprises. She found love not under flashing lights, but behind the camera in the middle of her fame. Actor and director Edward Burns met Christy in the late 90s. He was not caught up in the fashion circus. He admired her mind, her voice, and her depth. Their relationship was steady, private, and real. And in 2003, they got married. But even that was not the happy ending the public imagined. A couple of years later, during the birth of their first child, Christy nearly died.
I had such a great pregnancy and was so ready for it, and yet the post-delivery just blindsided me.
Your delivery almost killed you.
I started to hemorrhage. It was scary, but it was also very painful.
She had a postpartum hemorrhage, a severe complication that caused heavy bleeding after delivery. She lost a terrifying amount of blood. Doctors moved quickly. The room spun. The model who once had the world at her feet was suddenly fighting for her life in a delivery room. Later, she said, "No amount of fame prepares you for the fear of never seeing your baby grow up." That experience broke something open in her. It did not just change her outlook, it gave her a new mission. That same year, Christy traveled to El Salvador. She saw women giving birth in conditions that made her trauma look like luxury. No doctors, no medicine, just pain, risk, and silence. That's when she founded Every Mother Counts, a nonprofit focused on making childbirth safer for women everywhere. And suddenly, Christy wasn't just a face on a billboard anymore. She was a woman with a purpose far beyond fashion. Her marriage to Burns stayed strong but low-key. There were no tabloid feuds, no showy displays. They raised 2 kids quietly, rarely appearing in the spotlight together. While other celebrity couples courted attention, Christy chose privacy. She wasn't hiding. She was protecting something sacred. Yet even in that calm, the shadows of her past lingered.
In sync with the world, because there's so many similarities.
Yes.
I studied a course on cosmology and creation myths, and it's phenomenal how many things, how many beginning stories that we share in common with the rest of the world. And
Christy's relationship with smoking didn't begin in a modeling studio or some backstage party. It started at home. Her father, Dwight Turlington, was her hero, a pilot by profession and a rock in her life. But he had a habit of smoking, a lot, for nearly 50 years.
I lost my father a year and a half ago from lung cancer, and he smoked for 50 years or so. And I think he's one of the reasons I started smoking in the first place. I looked up to my dad, and he was, I mean, while I didn't like it as a young child, and it, would tell him to stop all the time.
As a child, Christy hated it. The smell, the smoke, the way it clung to everything. She'd wrinkle her nose and wave the air away when he lit a cigarette. She didn't understand why someone so strong, so full of life, would do something so obviously harmful. But kids imitate what they admire. And when her father had a heart attack and was forced to quit temporarily, it scared her. But it also left a deep impression. Smoking wasn't just a habit. It was a risk, a shadow.
During those
He
years?
did. He did. In fact, he had had a heart attack at one time and he had quit for a while, but he had a really hard time. I mean, it's an addiction.
Oh,
it's
definitely.
a very serious addiction. And it's like changing your whole lifestyle. And that's what I had to do ultimately 4 years ago when I...
Still, years later, when Christy stepped into the high-pressure world of modeling, that shadow caught up with her. It started casually between shoots, during long waits, after fittings. Cigarettes were everywhere. It was practically part of the uniform. And slowly, she picked it up. Maybe it made her feel older. Perhaps it made her feel in control. Maybe it reminded her of home.
My dad, it was different for him. He stopped December 1996. Just 6 months before he died from lung cancer.
Her father eventually developed lung cancer and passed away. The grief was immense, but even more painful was the realization that she was following in his footsteps. Not just in love or loyalty, but in addiction. After volunteering for a routine scan at New York Weill Cornell Medical Center, Christy learned she had early-stage emphysema at just 31. Her lungs were already deteriorating. She used the same lungs to hold her breath on photo shoots, exhale on runways, and scream into pillows after another red-eye flight. The disease wasn't just a diagnosis. It was a reckoning. But instead of retreating, Christy turned it into fuel. She became a public crusader against smoking, appearing in public service announcements and interviews and using her platform to talk openly about addiction and disease. She said, "I used to model cigarettes. Now I model survival." It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. And it made people listen. As the years went on, fashion tried to pull her back. Iconic designers wanted reunion shoots. Magazines wanted retrospective covers. She occasionally said yes, but only on her terms. No crash diets, no 20-hour shoots, no lies. Each time she stepped back into the spotlight, it felt more like a guest appearance than a return. She had already left in every way that mattered. Behind the scenes, people whispered. Was she done with the fashion world for good? Was there a rift with her old modeling friends? Had motherhood changed her too much to relate to that world anymore? The truth was quieter than rumors, but more powerful. Christy was no longer willing to be owned by anyone's expectations. She did not want to be anyone's ideal anymore. Not a perfect wife, not a perfect mother, and definitely not a perfect model. She once said, "You spend years being told you're flawless, and all it does is remind you of every flaw." Her decision to step back was not a breakdown. It was a boundary. Still, the cost of fame didn't vanish overnight. Christy has spoken about the pressure to be on at all times, even in private. The loneliness that came with being admired but rarely understood. She had walked red carpets with legends, but sometimes came home feeling empty. Motherhood grounded her. Activism fulfilled her. But the scars of early fame stayed. She often talked about needing space to breathe, a phrase that meant more than most knew, especially with her lung condition quietly worsening. And yet she remained strong, focused, intentional. She became more than a supermodel. She became a storyteller, a healer, a fighter. Today, Christy Turlington still looks like a legend. Still, she lives like a woman who finally learned the difference between attention and value. She doesn't update her fans daily. She doesn't chase headlines. She does not need to. And maybe that's her final rebellion, not being seen. Christy Turlington once ruled the fashion world but gave it all up to reclaim her life. She turned her pain into power, her spotlight into a cause, and her silence into a statement. She did not vanish because she had nothing left to say. She vanished because she was finally being heard by herself. In a world obsessed with beauty, her greatest act was choosing to live for something deeper than being looked at. Fame could not save her lungs. Perfection could not save her peace. So she found salvation elsewhere in love, motherhood, and truth. And maybe that is what we all missed while watching her walk away. What does it take to finally feel free in an industry that teaches women how to be adored?